Um, Picture this for a second. You are the king of Wu, right? So an ancient Chinese state.
Right.
And a guy named Sun Tzu has just handed you this manuscript.
The 13 chapters on military strategy.
Exactly. So you read it, and, well, you're intrigued. But to you, it's just ink on bamboo.
Yeah. It's all just theoretical at this point.
Right. So you want to know if this guy can actually execute. So you look at him and you ask, can I submit your theory to a slight test?
And Sun Tzu just says, you may.
Yeah, so calm. And the king, who is honestly probably thinking this is just some, like, intellectual parlor game, asks if the test can be applied to women.
Which is such a bizarre curveball.
Totally, but Sun Tzu just agrees. So the king brings out 180 of his absolute favorite concubines right out of the palace, hands them spears, and tells the philosopher, train them.
Which, I mean, that is a profound setup. The historian Sima Shen actually includes this in his introduction to the Lionel Giles translation for a very, very specific reason.
Oh, really? Why is that?
Well, the king is creating this completely absurd, artificially difficult scenario, you know. He's taking people with zero military background.
Right, people who are completely used to the luxuries of the court.
Exactly. The court politics, the comfort. And he's telling a strategist to turn them into soldiers on the spot.
And what Sun Tzu does next, I mean, it sets the tone for everything we're going to dive into today.
It really does.
He divides the 180 ladies into two companies, right? And he takes the king's two absolute favorite concubines and puts one at the head of each company as the commanders.
Giving them the weapons and everything.
Yeah, he gives them all their weapons. He stands before them and asks, do you know the difference between front and back, right and left?
And the women say yes.
Right. So he explains the drill. He says, eyes front means look ahead. Left turn means face left. He explains it perfectly clearly.
And he even sets up executioners' axes in the courtyard, just to show he means business.
Yeah, axes. So the drums sound. He orders right turn, and the women just burst out laughing.
Because to them, this is courtly entertainment. It's a pantomime.
Exactly.
They have absolutely no concept of the gravity of military discipline because, well, they've never been exposed to an environment where a misunderstood order literally means death.
They think it's a dance.
Yeah. They're treating it like a game.
But Sun Tzu, he doesn't miss a single beat. He looks at them and states his first rule of command.
Which is...
He says, if words of command are not clear and distinct, if orders are not thoroughly understood, then the general is to blame.
Wow. So he just takes total ownership.
Total ownership.
Yeah.
He assumes he just didn't explain it well enough to them. So he starts over.
He drills them again?
Yeah, he explains the directions again, makes sure they understand the drums. The drums sound a second time. He orders left turn. And again, the ladies just burst into fits of laughter.
And this is the moment. This is where the theoretical clipboard is just thrown right out the window.
Oh, yeah.
This is where theory crashes headfirst into reality.
Because Sun Tzu then states his second rule. He says, if words of command are not clear and distinct, the general is to blame. But if his orders are clear and the soldiers nevertheless disobey, then it is the fault of their officers.
Right.
And right then and there, he orders the two favorite concubines, the commanders, to be beheaded.
Which is just, I mean, the king is watching all of this unfold from a raised pavilion. Right?
Yeah, he's right there.
And suddenly the parlor game is over. He absolutely panics.
He sends down this frantic messenger, basically screaming, I'm totally satisfied with your ability. If you kill these two women, my meat and drink will lose their flavor. Do not execute them.
And Sun Tzu's response is just legendary.
It gives me chills. He looks at the king's messenger and says, having once received his majesty's commission to be the general of his forces, there are certain commands of his majesty which, acting in that capacity, I am unable to accept.
He just completely ignores the king.
He ignores him. He signals the executioners. He cuts off their heads.
Unbelievable.
He replaces them with the next two women in line. And the next time he gives the order, the women perform the drill with absolute terrifying precision. They don't utter a single sound. So welcome to the deep dive.
It's just a remarkable way to open our discussion today.
It really sets the stage.
It does. Because we are unpacking Lionel Giles's legendary translation of The Art of War and that specific anecdote, it establishes the fundamental premise of the entire text.
That this is not a game.
Exactly. Sun Tzu states later in Chapter 1 that war is a matter of life and death, right? It's a road either to safety or to ruin.
You can't neglect it.
No, you can't. By executing the favorites despite the king's direct protest, Sun Tzu's proving that the authority of the commander on the field, driven by the objective reality of the situation, supersedes even the whims of the sovereign.
It establishes the absolute stakes right out of the gate.
It does. It really does.
So our mission today for you, the listener, is custom tailored to extract the absolute most vital foundational nuggets from this 2,400-year-old masterpiece.
Right, because we aren't going to get bogged down in, the specific dimensions of a chariot.
No, no. Or ancient supply cart logistics.
Yeah.
We're pulling out the core philosophical engines of the text.
Which are so applicable today.
Exactly. So we're going to cover the 5 constant factors of warfare, the central role of deception, the ultimate goal of winning without actually fighting, and the web of espionage that makes all of it possible.
And the challenge with the art of war, I think, is that it's incredibly susceptible to being misunderstood.
Oh, for sure. People pull single sentences out of context.
Right. They slap them on corporate PowerPoint slides. But the underlying mechanics, they're an intricate, highly interdependent system.
You can't just pick and choose.
Exactly. You can't understand the deception without understanding the discipline, and you definitely can't understand the bloodless victory without understanding the spies.
Okay, so let's start at the absolute bedrock then. Chapter 1.
Laying plans.
Right. Sun Tzu says that before you ever draw a sword, before you even look at an enemy, you have to calculate your position using 5 foundational pillars, the 5 constant factors.
And the location of this planning is vital. Sun Tzu believed that victory is determined in the temple.
In the temple?
Yes, through rigorous, almost mathematical analysis long before the troops are ever mobilized.
So it's not figured out on the fly?
Not at all. The text explicitly states that a general who makes many calculations in his temple before the battle wins. The one who makes few loses.
Wow.
He even adds, how much more no calculation at all. It's very rigid calculus.
And he gives us the specific variables for that equation, right? The moral law, heaven, earth, the commander, and method and discipline.
Those are the 5.
Let's break these down, because as I was reading this, I just found myself constantly translating these military terms into modern organizational dynamic.
Oh, they translate beautifully.
Right. It reads like a blueprint for evaluating a startup or a massive corporation.
So let's look at the first factor, the moral law. Giles translates Sun Tzu's definition as causing the people to be in complete accord with their ruler, so that they will follow him regardless of their lives, undismayed by any danger.
That phrase, complete accord, is doing a lot of heavy lifting there.
It really is.
In a modern context, I mean, the moral law is your company culture, right? It's your core mission.
Yes, exactly.
It's not the surface level stuff. It's not having like ping pong tables in the break room or a really charismatic CEO.
No, it's much deeper.
It's asking the fundamental question. Do the people in this organization believe in the mission so deeply that they will endure a crisis?
Right. When things get bad.
Exactly. When the runway is shrinking, when the competitor launches a better product, when you have to work 3 weekends in a row, do they stay or do they jump ship at the first sign of danger?
And historically, complete accord meant shared sacrifice.
Literal life and death.
Right. It meant the soldiers believed that the survival of the state or the success of the campaign was synonymous with their own survival. If a general fails to cultivate that moral law, everything else is entirely irrelevant.
Because they'll just run away.
Exactly. You can have the best weapons and the most brilliant tactics, but if the men drop their spears and run when the enemy charges, your strategy is absolutely useless. The foundation cracks.
Which brings us to the second factor, which, and this is interesting, operates completely outside of human control. Heaven.
Heaven, yes.
Sun Tzu defines heaven as night and day, cold and heat, times and seasons. It's the environmental timing.
A factor that has ruined countless military campaigns throughout history.
Oh, I bet.
You don't march an army of heavily armored infantry into a torrential monsoon unless you have calculated the exact effect the mud will have on your supply lines.
And they're bowstrings.
Right. It's the recognition that you are operating within a larger, completely indifferent system.
So translating that to today, for everyone listening, heaven is macroeconomic timing.
Oh, that's a great way to look at it.
It's the broader ecosystem you're launching into. Like, are we in a historic bull market where venture capital is just flowing like water?
Or is inflation rising and interest rates are punishingly high?
Exactly. You can have a brilliant product and incredible internal moral law, but if the seasons of the economy are against you, like if you're launching a luxury travel app during a global lockdown,
You are marching into a blizzard.
you're doomed. So we have the mission and the timing. The third factor anchors you in physical reality, Earth.
Earth. And Sun Tzu says Earth comprises distances, great and small, danger and security, Open ground and narrow passes, the chances of life and death.
It's the terrain.
It is the terrain, and terrain dictates strategy.
Right. If you are fighting in a narrow pass, a smaller, highly disciplined force can hold off a massive army.
Like Thermopylae.
Exactly. But if you're on open ground, mobility and cavalry become the deciding factors.
In the corporate landscape, the Earth is your market positioning.
Okay, break that down.
Who are your competitors? Are you fighting in an open ground market?
Like, say, trying to launch a new social media platform where there are no barriers to entry but infinite competition.
Perfect example. Or are you operating in a narrow pass?
So like a highly regulated, specialized industry. Aerospace manufacturing.
Exactly, where the barriers to entry are massive, but if you can hold the pass, you dominate the market.
That makes total sense. You have to calculate the ground you are fighting on because the terrain itself is a weapon.
It is.
Okay, so we have the mission, the timing, and the terrain. The fourth factor is the person orchestrating all of it, the commander.
The commander.
And here's where Sun Tzu gives us a very specific list of virtues. He says the commander must possess wisdom, sincerity, benevolence, courage, and strictness.
It's a fascinating combination, isn't it? Because it
Yeah.
balances deep intellectual capacity wisdom with raw physical bravery.
Courage.
Right. And then it pairs those with moral grounding, benevolence, and sincerity.
Okay, wait. I have to stop here and push back on this text
Okay, let's hear it.
because I struggled with this list immensely. Sun Tzu lists sincerity and benevolence. He wants a commander who is essentially honest and kind.
Right.
But as we're going to discuss in depth very shortly, this entire book is a masterclass in lying, trickery, manipulation, and ruthless deceit.
It is.
So how in the world can a philosopher demand a sincere leader who is going to spend the next 12 chapters explaining how to completely gaslight the entire world?
The contradiction you're pointing out is actually the secret to the entire system.
Really? Because it seems like a glaring flaw.
It trips up almost everyone who reads the text for the first time. But the resolution lies in understanding the audience.
The audience.
The sincerity, benevolence, and strictness, they're strictly, exclusively for internal cohesion.
Oh.
They are the tools you use to build the moral law we talked about.
So the sincerity is entirely directed at your own troops.
Absolutely. You must be utterly reliable to your own people. You must be completely transparent in your rewards and your punishments.
Because if you lie to them, the moral law breaks.
Exactly. Later in chapter 10, Sun Tzu explicitly states, "Regard your soldiers as your children, and they will follow you into the deepest valleys. Look upon them as your own beloved sons, and they will stand by you even unto death."
Wow.
If your own troops think you are deceiving them, or if they suspect your punishments are just arbitrary, discipline collapses. You must have an unshakable, sincere foundation internally.
But externally.
Externally, you project absolute chaos. The deception is for the enemy. The sincerity is for your team.
That is fascinating.
In fact, it is only because you are so reliable and sincere to your own troops that they trust you enough to execute the insane, unpredictable deceptions you demand of them.
That completely flips my understanding of it.
It's a paradigm shift for sure.
It's like building a rocket.
Okay, I like this.
The internal mechanics, right? The fuel lines, the guidance systems, they have to be perfectly engineered. They have to be reliable and sincere.
Right, because if there's a flaw inside, the rocket explodes on the launch pad.
Exactly. But once you launch it at the enemy, its flight path can be erratic, evasive, and terrifyingly unpredictable.
That's a perfect bridge to the fifth and final factor, method and discipline.
Okay.
Because method and discipline, that is the engineering of that rocket.
The mechanics of it.
Yes. Sun Tzu defines this as the marshaling of the army in its proper subdivisions, the graduations of rank among the officers, the maintenance of roads by which supplies may reach the army, and the control of military expenditure.
It's pure operations and logistics.
It really is.
It's the unglamorous stuff, like who reports to whom? How are the supply chains functioning? Do we have the cash flow to survive the quarter?
And Sun Tzu states that these 5 heads should be familiar to every general.
Right.
He who knows them will be victorious. He who knows them not will fail. It's a binary outcome.
So you do this in the temple?
In the temple, yes.
Yeah.
You take these 5 factors and you ruthlessly compare them against your enemy. Which sovereign possesses the moral law? Which army is stronger? On which side is discipline most rigorously enforced?
And by asking those specific questions,
Sun Tzu says, I can forecast victory or defeat.
man, it's all about mitigating risk before you ever make a move. You secure the internal foundation, you ensure your commander is sincere to the troops, the operations are disciplined, and the market timing is right.
And once that internal calculus is locked in, you step out of the temple and onto the battlefield.
And that is when the rules completely invert.
Yes, the internal rigidity transforms into external fluidity. Which brings us to the philosophical core of Sun Tzu's active strategy found in Chapter 1.
All warfare is based on deception.
A statement as absolute as it is provocative.
It really is. Because it's not a suggestion. It's not, some warfare involves trickery. All warfare is based on deception.
It's the atomic unit of his strategy.
Let's dig into the actual mechanics of this, because it's much deeper than simply telling a lie. It's about systematically distorting the enemy's reality.
Sun Tzu immediately breaks down how this is applied. He says, hence, when able to attack, we must seem unable. When using our forces, we must seem inactive.
Seem inactive.
When we are near, we must make the enemy believe we are far away. When far away, we must make him believe we are near. You are constantly manipulating their perception of your capability and your location.
The psychological toll that must take on an opposing general is just staggering.
Well, it would be exhausting.
Right. If you constantly seem far away when you're actually near, the enemy never knows when they are safe. They have to sleep with one eye open. You are exhausting them just by existing in a state of ambiguity.
But the true genius of this concept, and you really only see this when we pull in Chapter 5 on energy and Chapter 6 on weak points and strong.
Okay, what does he say there?
Sun Tzu explains the underlying mechanism required to pull off this level of deception. He says, simulated disorder postulates perfect discipline. Simulated fear postulates courage. Simulated weakness postulates strength.
I want to linger on that first phrase. Simulated disorder postulates perfect discipline. How does faking chaos require more organization than just fighting normally?
Well, imagine two armies facing each other on a field. The standard objective is pretty simple. Hold your line, protect the man next to you, and push forward.
Right.
Now imagine a general ordering his troops to fake a panic and retreat to bait the enemy into a trap.
Okay, a fake retreat.
If you tell a poorly trained militia to act terrified and run away, they will actually become terrified.
Oh.
The simulated disorder will trigger genuine panic. The men will break formation, they will drop their weapons, and they will be slaughtered as they run.
Because fear is contagious.
Incredibly contagious.
Wow.
So, to successfully simulate disorder, an army must possess the absolute highest level of discipline. Every single soldier must understand that the retreat is a pantomime.
A choreographed dance.
Exactly. They must run in a specifically choreographed direction at a specific speed while looking terrified, and then, at a single predetermined drumbeat, they must instantly halt, turn around, reform a perfect battle line, and counterattack.
That is mind-boggling.
It is.
It requires the sincerity we talked about earlier.
Yes, the connection is right there.
The soldiers have to trust the commander completely that this fake retreat isn't actually a suicide mission. So you can only successfully fake weakness if you are fundamentally structurally strong.
Exactly, the dynamic Sun Tzu is highlighting.
Because if you try to fake weakness when you are actually weak, you just invite the enemy to crush you faster.
Hiding order beneath the cloak of disorder is a function of that fifth factor, method and discipline.
It all ties together.
It does. And the overarching goal of all this deception isn't just to be tricky.
Right.
It is to impose your will on the enemy while never allowing their will to be imposed on you. You become the director of their actions.
He gives fantastic specific examples of this psychological hacking, too. He says, hold out baits to entice the enemy, feign disorder, and crush him.
The bait is crucial.
And then he gets deeply personal, which I love. He says, if your opponent is of choleric temper, seek to irritate him. Pretend to be weak, that he may grow arrogant.
It's weaponized annoyance.
Weaponized annoyance, that's perfect.
You are exploiting their emotional baseline. If they are prone to anger, you provoke them into making a rash decision, abandoning their own tempo calculations.
Right, you make them emotional.
If they are well supplied, you starve them out. If they are quietly encamped and resting, you force them to move and harass them. You appear at points they must hasten to defend.
You force them to exhaust their resources, reacting to phantoms you have created.
Phantoms, exactly.
This constant manipulation of information, it makes me think about the difference between a game of chess and a game of poker.
Oh, the distinction between perfect and imperfect information.
Right, because chess is a game of perfect information. The board is fully visible. I see your knights, you see my bishops. We both know the physical rules of the terrain.
There are no secrets on a chessboard.
None. Victory in chess comes from calculating moves ahead based on completely visible data. But poker is a game of hidden information. I have no idea what cards you're holding, and you don't know mine. Sun Tzu is essentially saying, if you find yourself sitting down to a game of chess, flip the table over, deal some cards, and turn it into poker.
And you force the enemy to keep playing chess while you are playing poker.
Oh, it's brilliant.
In Chapter 6, Sun Tzu articulates the mathematical advantage of this hidden information perfectly. He states, "The spot where we intend to fight must not be made known, for then the enemy will have to prepare against a possible attack at several different points.
And if they prepare everywhere.
If he prepares to the front, his rear will be weak. If to the rear, his front will be weak. If he prepares everywhere, he will be everywhere weak."
Wow.
By withholding information, you force the enemy to dilute their strength across the entire terrain.
You haven't even fired a single arrow yet.
Not one. But you have mathematically reduced their defensive capability at the point of your choosing, simply by keeping them guessing.
Imagine applying this poker mindset to a high-stakes modern negotiation.
Let's hear it.
So you're walking into a mediation over a massive contract dispute, right? You've done the temple calculations, you have all the data.
You know your position.
Exactly. But you walk into the boardroom and intentionally feign ignorance on a minor, easily provable point.
A trap.
You let the opposing counsel correct you. You play dumb. You pretend to be weak, just like Sun Tzu says, so they grow arrogant.
You are inflating their ego, which degrades their caution.
Exactly. And because they feel superior, because they think you are underprepared, they let their guard down on the massive structural clause you actually care about. You've imposed your will by hiding your strength.
To illustrate this fluid, adaptive approach to conflict, Sun Tzu provides what I consider the most profound metaphor in the entire text in Chapter 6.
Oh, the water analogy.
Yes, he likens military tactics to water.
It's so poetic, but I want to make sure we don't just gloss over it as a nice quote. There's real mechanics there.
There are. He says, water in its natural course runs away from high places and hastens downwards. So in war, the way is to avoid what is strong and to strike at what is weak.
Okay.
Water shapes its course according to the nature of the ground over which it flows. A soldier works out his victory in relation to the foe he is facing.
Let's really dig into the mechanics of why water is such a terrifying metaphor for an army. We always think of water as soft, right?
But water is incredibly destructive.
So destructive. It doesn't just flow around a rock, it exploits the rock.
The hydraulic pressure.
Yes. If a river hits a dam, it doesn't just bounce off, it pools. It accumulates mass and pressure, constantly probing the face of the dam for the lowest point, the microscopic cracks in the foundation.
Finding the weakness.
It flows into those cracks, and when the temperature drops, it freezes, expands, and shatters the stone from the inside.
That is the essence of avoiding strength and striking weakness.
Right.
An army acting like water doesn't launch a frontal assault against a fortified wall. It flows around the wall, cutting off the supply lines behind it.
It pools its resources.
Exactly. Applying invisible pressure to the enemy's logistics until the enemy collapses under their own weight. He says, just as water retains no constant shape, so in warfare, there are no constant conditions.
So if you were constantly acting like water flowing around strong points, exploiting weaknesses, and perfectly deceiving the enemy with simulated disorder, what is the end game?
The ultimate goal.
Yeah, what is the actual goal of all this maneuvering? Because the biggest shock for anyone reading The Art of War is realizing that the goal isn't to set up a massive, glorious, cinematic clash of swords on an open field.
Quite the opposite, actually.
Yeah.
If you execute the deception perfectly, if you flow like water and bait the enemy into exhausting themselves chasing shadows, you skip the kinetic clash entirely.
No swords?
No swords.
Yeah.
Which brings us to Chapter 3, Attack by Stratagem and the pinnacle of Sun Tzu's philosophy.
He writes, "To fight and conquer in all your battles is not supreme excellence. Supreme excellence consists in breaking the enemy's resistance without fighting."
Winning without fighting.
It seems paradoxical for a military manual.
It does. But it is the ultimate expression of the pragmatic calculus we discussed in Chapter 1. Sun Tzu establishes a strict hierarchy of generalship to illustrate this.
Okay, what's the hierarchy?
The highest form of generalship, the absolute best thing you can do, is to balk the enemy's plans.
Meaning you destroy their strategy before they can even mobilize?
You win in the temple.
Right.
You realize they are planning to march through a narrow pass, so you visibly garrison a massive force at the end of it. The enemy sees your force, realizes their plan is ruined, and they retreat without a drop of blood being spilled. You balked their plan.
That's incredible. So what's the next best thing?
The second best policy, if you can't stop their plans, is to prevent the junction of the enemy's forces.
Break their alliances, isolate them diplomatically, cut their supply lines so their two armies can't meet.
Exactly. Still no actual fighting required.
Amazing.
It's only the third option, the third step down in the hierarchy of quality, which is to attack the enemy's army in the field.
So actual fighting is third best.
Yes. And then there is the absolute worst policy of all, the lowest, most desperate form of warfare.
To besiege walled cities.
Sun Tzu actively despises the siege.
You can really tell when you read it.
He views it as a total failure of imagination and strategy.
And the visceral details he uses to dissuade generals from laying siege, they are horrifying.
They really paint a picture.
He talks about the sheer logistical nightmare of it. He says the preparation of mantlets, which are these massive movable shields and various implements of war, will take 3 whole months.
3 months.
And then piling up mounds of earth against the city walls to try and breach them takes another 3 months. That's half a year just getting ready to attack a wall.
And consider the psychological state of the commander during those 6 months.
How miserable.
You're sitting outside a wall, your men are getting sick, your supplies are dwindling. The text says, the general, unable to control his irritation, will launch his men to the assault like swarming ants.
Swarming ants, it's such a dark, dehumanizing image.
It is.
It strips away all the glory of war. It's just mindless, futile death against stone.
And the result of this tantrum, Sun Tzu writes that 1/3 of his men are slain, while the town still remains untaken.
A third of the army.
He calls these the disastrous effects of a siege. It is the antithesis of supreme excellence.
It really reframes the entire book. It's an art of war that fundamentally hates the kinetic reality of war.
It hates the inefficiency of it. Sun Tzu is a supreme pragmatist. In Chapter 2, titled Waging War, he lays out the exact economic mathematics of why actual fighting is a catastrophic failure.
He puts a literal price tag on combat.
He does.
And the math is devastating. He calculates the cost of mobilizing an army of 100,000 men. He lists the requirements: 1,000 swift chariots, 1,000 heavy chariots, 100,000 mail-clad soldiers.
A massive undertaking.
Provisions to carry them 1,000 li, which is roughly 300 miles. He even includes the micro expenses, which I found fascinating. The entertainment of diplomatic guests, the glue and paint needed to repair armor and chariots.
He thought of everything.
And the total daily expenditure for this massive organism to just exist in the field.
1,000 ounces of silver per day.
1,000 ounces of silver a day. The burn rate is astronomical.
And that economic drain triggers a cascading collapse of the state. Sun Tzu notes that if a campaign is prolonged, the weapons grow dull, the men's ardor is damped, and the treasury is emptied.
The people back home pay the price.
The peasantry will be afflicted by heavy exactions, their homes will be stripped bare to pay for the war, and 3/10 of their income will be dissipated.
Yeah.
The government will spend 4/10 of its total revenue just replacing broken chariots and worn-out horses.
So the entire society is rotting from the inside out just to sustain the army.
Exactly.
And here's the most dangerous part of that prolonged exhaustion. When your treasury is empty, your weapons are dull, and your men are exhausted. That's when the surrounding chieftains, the third-party observers, spring up to take advantage of your extremity.
The vulture circle.
Yes. You might actually win the battle against your enemy, but you've weakened yourself so severely that a third party just walks in and wipes you both out.
Which is why Sun Tzu flatly states, there is no instance of a country having benefited from prolonged warfare.
None.
This is why the objective is to win without fighting. The cost of destruction is too high, even if you are the victor.
Think about this in the context of a modern corporate hostile takeover.
Let's do it.
Let's say your company wants to acquire a major competitor. The siege mentality would be to launch a massive, protracted price war to bleed their revenue, right?
Right.
Aggressively poach their top engineering staff, sue them over patent infringements to tie them up in court, and run negative PR campaigns.
A brutal, scorched earth campaign.
You spend millions trying to bankrupt them so you can buy their assets for pennies.
But if you actually succeed in that siege, what do you inherit?
You inherit a ruined brand. You inherit a toxic work environment full of exhausted employees who deeply resent you. You've spent millions of dollars on legal fees, and your own company's morale is in the gutter.
You have taken the country shattered, to use Sun Tzu's phrasing.
The Pyrrhic victory.
Exactly.
But the true genius, the supreme excellence, is outmaneuvering that competitor so perfectly, maybe by cutting off their vital supply chain or creating a technological leap that makes their entire product roadmap obsolete overnight.
You balk their plans.
You balk their plans so thoroughly that their board of directors realizes they cannot possibly win a protracted fight, so they come to the table and agree to a friendly merger.
And the result of that bloodless victory.
You acquire them with their patents intact, their talent relaxed and willing to integrate, and their market share preserved. You take the company whole and intact.
Which is precisely Sun Tzu's mandate in Chapter 3. The best thing of all is to take the enemy's country whole and intact. To shatter and destroy it is not so good.
So we have the ideal state. Win without fighting, balk their plans, take them whole.
Right.
But this brings up a massive logistical problem. To balk an enemy's plans, you have to know what those plans are.
Yes, you do.
To apply your water-like deception to their weakest points, you have to know where the microscopic cracks in their foundation are hidden.
You need foreknowledge.
Yeah.
And this is the crux of the entire system.
Okay, lay it out.
You cannot calculate the 5 factors in the temple, you cannot manipulate the enemy's perception, and you certainly cannot win a bloodless victory if you are blind. Intelligence gathering is the engine that makes the rest of the philosophy function.
Which brings us to the final and, frankly, the most intense section of the text. Chapter 13, the use of spies.
Sun Tzu frames this chapter with a profound moral argument, which connects directly back to the horrific economic costs of war we just discussed.
What does he say?
He says that remaining in ignorance of the enemy's condition, simply because you grudge spending 100 ounces of silver on spies, is the height of inhumanity.
The height of inhumanity.
Yeah.
He's morally judging a leader who tries to save a little bit of money on espionage.
Very harshly.
Because cheaping out on a spy means you end up fighting a war for years, exhausting your citizens, and causing hundreds of thousands of people to drop dead on the highways from starvation and combat.
When a few ounces of silver could have bought the foreknowledge to end the war in a week.
Wow.
He argues that a leader who refuses to use spies is no leader of men and no master of victory. Foreknowledge is the singular asset that enables the wise sovereign to achieve things beyond the reach of ordinary men.
And he is incredibly explicit about the source of this foreknowledge. He writes that it cannot be elicited from spirits, it cannot be guessed from experience, and it cannot be obtained by deductive calculation.
You can't pray for it, and you can't guess it.
You must get it from men.
Knowledge of the enemy's dispositions can only be extracted from other human beings. To acquire it, Sun Tzu outlines a highly organized 5-tiered intelligence network.
The 5 classes of spies.
Yes. When all 5 classes of spies are at work simultaneously, he calls it the divine manipulation of the threads.
The divine manipulation of the threads. It evokes the image of a master weaver, or a puppet master.
It totally does.
Let's trace these threads because it's a brilliant system. First, we have local spies.
Right.
This means employing the services of the inhabitants of a district, the farmers, the merchants, the regular people living on the ground where the campaign is happening.
Just eyes on the ground.
Exactly. Second, inward spies, making use of officials of the enemy.
This is the infiltration of the enemy's bureaucracy.
Oh, interesting.
It's identifying the disgruntled general, the passed-over bureaucrat, or the greedy quartermaster and turning them into a covert asset inside the enemy's decision-making apparatus.
Got it. Third, surviving spies. These are the traditional scouts, the highly trained operatives whose specific mission is to infiltrate the enemy camp, observe troop movements, gather physical intelligence, and survive the journey back to bring that news to you.
Those first 3 are standard, recognizable forms of intelligence gathering. But then we reach the 4th class, which introduces a level of psychological warfare that is incredibly confronting.
Yeah, the doomed spies.
The doomed spies.
I have to be honest, when I read this section of the source material, I had a visceral reaction. It is cold, calculated, and terrifying.
It's ruthless.
The text describes the use of doomed spies as doing certain things openly for purposes of deception, and allowing our own spies to know of them and report them to the enemy.
To fully grasp the function of the doomed spy, you have to understand the brutal mechanics of ancient interrogation.
Okay, prepare me.
If you send a spy into an enemy camp carrying false plans, and the enemy captures them, the enemy will inevitably torture them to verify the information.
Right. Standard practice back then.
Now, if the spy knows the plans are fake, human endurance has a limit. Eventually, under torture, they will break and confess the real strategy.
Which exposes everything.
Exactly. So Sun Tzu's solution is a masterpiece of dark psychology. He lies to his own spies.
He lies to them?
He orchestrates a fake military maneuver, lets his doomed spies accidentally discover these plans, and then sends them out into the field. When they are captured by the enemy and subjected to torture, they will stubbornly, desperately insist that the false maneuver is the absolute truth, because they genuinely believe it is the truth.
And the enemy interrogator believes the confession because it was extracted under the utmost duress. It reads as authentic because the suffering is authentic.
The enemy then acts on that false, verified information, marching their army directly into Sun Tzu's trap. But the spy.
The spy is doomed because once the enemy general realizes he's been tricked by the information, he will execute the spy in a rage.
It is a guaranteed death sentence.
Okay, I have to stop and interrogate this because this feels like a massive contradiction to everything we discussed in Chapter 1.
Bring it back to sincerity.
Yes, we spent all that time establishing that the commander must possess sincerity and benevolence to build the moral law. He must treat his soldiers like his beloved sons. How can you treat your soldiers like beloved sons and simultaneously send them on a mission where you are intentionally lying to them, knowing it will result in their torture and execution? If the rest of the army finds out you are sacrificing your own people like this, won't there be an immediate mutiny? Doesn't this shatter the moral law?
That is the tension at the absolute heart of the art of war. It is the ultimate trolley problem, solved with extreme, unflinching utilitarianism.
A trolley problem, yeah.
Sun Tzu would argue that the sincerity of the commander is applied to the survival of the whole. Remember, war is a matter of life and death for the entire state.
Okay.
If sacrificing a handful of doomed spies successfully deceives the enemy and prevents a 6-month siege, thereby saving the lives of 50,000 soldiers and preventing the economic collapse of the peasantry.
Yeah, the 1,000 ounces of silver a day.
Right. Sun Tzu views that not as a betrayal, but as the grim burden of command.
The math of survival. He's trading 10 lives to save 10,000. It doesn't make it any less horrifying to the 10 who are doomed, but the logic is airtight.
It is cold logic.
But the network doesn't end there. There is a fifth class. And Sun Tzu explicitly states this is the most vital threat of all: the converted spies.
The converted spy is the linchpin. The text states, getting hold of the enemy's spies and using them for our own purposes.
Double agents.
Precisely. Sun Tzu identifies the converted spy as the locus of control for the entire intelligence web. He writes, it is through the information brought by the converted spy that we are able to acquire and employ local and inward spies.
Okay.
It is owing to his information, again, that we can cause the doomed spy to carry false tidings.
Let's track that logic. The converted spy originally worked for the enemy.
Right.
Therefore, they intimately know the internal politics of the enemy camp. They can tell you, hey, the enemy's quartermaster is deeply in debt and hates his boss. Boom. Now you know exactly who to bribe to create an inward spy.
Yes. Furthermore, the converted spy knows the psychological profile of the enemy general. They know what kind of false information the general is most anxious about and what he is most likely to believe.
Oh, wow.
That tells you exactly what lie to feed the doomed spy.
The converted spy is the master key that unlocks all the other doors. It's no wonder Sun Tzu insists that the enemy's spies must be sought out, tempted with bribes, led away, and comfortably housed.
He concludes that the converted spy must be treated with the utmost liberality. You spare absolutely no expense on them.
Because their risk is absolute and their value is infinite.
Precisely.
For everyone listening, pull this ancient espionage network into the modern era. Think about modern corporate espionage or cybersecurity.
It maps perfectly.
The parallels are almost one-to-one. A local spy is someone scraping public data, reading Glassdoor reviews, monitoring shipping manifests.
Right. And a surviving spy is a penetration tester or a hacker who breaches a firewall, grabs the encrypted data, and gets out undetected.
An inward spy is the disgruntled middle manager leaking proprietary code to a rival company.
But the converted spy.
That is finding the mercenary hacker that your competitor hired to attack your servers, paying them triple their fee, and having them feed corrupted data back to their original boss.
Yes. Human intelligence, the manipulation of greed, fear, and information hasn't fundamentally changed its core dynamics in 2,400 years.
And when we synthesize all of this, the true brilliance of the Lionel Giles translation emerges. These 13 chapters are not isolated maxims. They are a continuous, cyclical engine.
They all feed into each other.
You cannot accurately calculate the earth, the physical terrain in the temple, without surviving and local spies bringing you topographical maps.
You cannot implement deception seeming weak when you are actually strong, unless your converted spies tell you what the enemy is currently perceiving. You have to know what they think they see in order to gaslight them effectively.
Exactly. You cannot be like water flowing around strong points to strike at weak points if you don't know where the high ground and the low ground actually are.
Spies are the ultimate enablers of the bloodless victory.
They are the invisible threads the wise sovereign manipulates to balk the enemy's plans before the swords are ever drawn. Let's take a breath and recap the incredible architecture we've explored today on this deep dive, because it is a massive conceptual shift.
It really is a lot to take in.
We started by throwing out the theoretical clipboard. We looked at the brutal, unflinching discipline required to establish the 5 constant factors, remembering the concubines, and the absolute necessity of internal sincerity and method to build the moral law.
We then explored how that rock-solid internal foundation is masked externally through the central mechanic of deception.
The paradox that you can only successfully fake disorder if you possess perfect discipline.
Right.
We realize that the ultimate aim of all this shifting, water-like deception isn't a glorious battle, but avoiding the horrors and the 1,000 ounce of silver daily cost of a siege.
The goal is supreme excellence, winning without fighting and taking the enemy whole and intact.
And finally, we learn that this entire bloodless deceptive system rests entirely on foreknowledge, powered by a secret, divine web of spies, with the converted double agent acting as the linchpin of reality manipulation.
So, bringing this all the way back to you, the listener, what does this ancient military calculus mean for your life today?
How do you use it?
It suggests that the underlying dynamics of conflict and competition remain remarkably constant. Whether you are navigating a complex, highly political office dynamic, launching a disruptive business into an entrenched market, or simply trying to critically evaluate the geopolitical maneuvering on the evening news.
Sun Tzu's framework applies.
It does. Know yourself. Know your enemy. Calculate endlessly in the temple before you commit your resources. Cultivate absolute internal reliability. Project external unpredictability. And, whenever possible, seek the water's path to avoid a direct, draining clash.
I want to leave you with one final, deeply provocative thought to mull over. We've established that foreknowledge is the most valuable currency in conflict. Sun Tzu says in Chapter 6 that the highest pitch of tactical disposition is to conceal your plans completely.
Keep them hidden.
He writes, "Conceal your dispositions, and you will be safe from the prying of the subtlest spies. You must protect your internal data, your plans, and your weaknesses at all costs."
Absolutely.
Yet today, consider the world we have built. We live in an era of constant, voluntary, enthusiastic sharing.
Oh, yeah.
We broadcast our movements, our thoughts, our locations, our social networks, our corporate roadmaps, and our emotional states on social media and the internet, minute by minute.
We give it all away for free to anyone watching.
Based on a 2,400-year-old masterpiece of strategic survival, by willingly broadcasting our foreknowledge, are we unwittingly doing the enemy's espionage for them?
That's a chilling thought.
By making our dispositions entirely visible, have we made ourselves the easiest, most vulnerable targets in history? Are we, without even realizing it, just wandering out onto the field, treating life like a parlor game, totally blind to the fact that the axes are already set up in the courtyard? Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep your eyes open, keep your plans fluid, and as always, keep questioning the information around you.